We have a couple of clips to look at of Jessica Tarlov, who's been back for a while now on The Five to destroy Fox News' propaganda that spews from her MAGA co-host, doing it 4v1 just like the good old days. So let's pull a couple of these clips to look at them discussing Kamala to just break down with the needed context.
I think that she has a lot to say. I mean, if you watch the whole video, for instance, when she was talking about defunding the police, the point she was making is really salient. She was talking about what a safe neighborhood looks like, and it's not crawling with cops, right? It has great schools. It has thriving small businesses. It has really high home ownership, which has been a priority of the Biden-Harris administration to make sure that people can get on the property ladder. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, as it were, of what the Biden-Harris administration did it. The most delicious flavor of it at all. You know, they have invested more in law enforcement than any other administration in history. Donald Trump actually proposed a 58% cut to the community policing program. They put 3,700 police officers on the street through that program. Another 100,000 that came in through the Safer America plan. The American Rescue Plan had $15 billion in it for crime and policing to make sure that we have safer communities. It's a strong record to run on.
When talking about crime, the first thing to remember is that cops don't stop crime. That's literally not their job description. They respond to crime. To stop something, you have to be proactive, not reactive. The analogy that I always like to use is, imagine you get a cut on your stomach. When you realize you're bleeding and the blood's got on your shirt, you just go and change your shirt and get a new one. Like, it might fix the problem for now, but it's not going to stop the blood from coming. And if you look at research on the matter, cops actually don't spend most of their time solving serious or violent crimes. They don't do it with any consistency or regularity. And they actually spend most of their time, like writ large, if you look, spend most of their time conducting racially biased stops, much more than they do fighting crime. So what you have to think is what drives crime. And it's two sides of the same coin that really just trickle back to income inequality and poverty, but more so the former, because what drives crime is the blend of desperation and opportunity. A desperate person with the opportunity to steal or do a crime of what will feel like necessity for them almost always will. If you have a neighborhood of all poor people, they might do crime, but they won't have as much opportunity to steal because, well, there won't be as many things to steal. But if you have a neighborhood of such income inequality where there's wealthy people and poor people, you will then have that blend of desperation and opportunity as well. This is why the best way to stop crime is to invest in these neighborhoods, to raise wages, create jobs and opportunity for all, shelters that people can live in that doesn't discriminate on what baggage you may bring with you. Housing first, if you ask me. You need to invest in better schools and activities to keep the youth engaged in, and watch how fast crime will drop in these neighborhoods. If we think of neighborhoods with low crime rates, it's the ones with the most money in them, not the ones with the most cops in them. The neighborhoods with the most cops in them generally are the more dangerous neighborhoods, and that's because the people in the wealthy neighborhoods are not desperate.
The border right now, we were talking about this. Jennifer Griffin was tweeting about the two Sinaloa cartel bosses that were apprehended. She said that it was like catching bin Laden when it comes to the war against fentanyl. That happened under the Biden-Harris administration. Encounters at the border are down 55% since the executive order. These are all things
out of hitting numbers that had wildly spiked after the Trump administration, not back down to those numbers.
I understand that, and you obviously have to acknowledge that there were huge spikes, but it doesn't mean that she's the same person that you saw in 2020. She oversaw the implementation of the policies that have led to all of these good results.
Biden and Harris have begun to address the issues in the way they can, while Republicans have their hands tied behind their backs by refusing to legislate in a meaningful manner during the election year, passing on bipartisan border efforts that were rather conservative if you look into the bill, and instead forcing them to use executive action that is likely to be tried in court and blocked. But they've still seen crossings at the border drop 55% to where they were when the administration took office. And you have to remember, border crossings doubled to almost 1 million under Trump in 2019. So it's not like his policies were the solution he likes to pretend that they were, while also being grossly inhumane and racially and ethnically targeted.
Not only is Kamala Harris the most radically left-wing politician who's ever run for president, but she's running against the least ideological, least partisan, most common sense sort of practical politician that we've ever had in my
you're like the only person that thinks that about
Oh, no. If you look at the issues,
that he's the most common sense
Oh,
person.
yeah, absolutely. You look at the border, you look at all of those issues, you look at the issue of abortion that has gotten him into trouble.
Okay.
All of those things
He said, yeah, it's up to the states. I did this. There are
American
6-week abortion bans, even in his own state.
Yeah, I have to say, this was probably one of the most insane statements I've ever heard anybody confidently make. Trump tried to subvert an election, use fake electors to do so, and then plead it to the courts that he needed immunity instead of saying, I didn't do it. That's not what he says. He doesn't deny any of what happened. He just says he needs immunity for it. He says beautiful things are happening since he overturned Roe, and now children rape victims are being forced to carry to term. He wants to do mass deportations like the country's never seen before, tax cuts for billionaires and corporations that will have to be coupled with spending cuts for social programs that the majority of America probably relies on. He wants to pardon violent rioters at the Capitol, install loyalists in the government, and this is the most common sense candidate we've ever had and the least partisan. He's literally the person who created the hyper-partisan nature in politics. He's the guy who calls all Democrats thugs and criminals. He claims that all Democrats are Marxists and trying to destroy the country. He literally ran on chanting "Lock up Hillary" in 2016. He calls Joe Biden crooked, spread the narrative that he has dementia. Now he insults Kamala in any way that he can, while the only people on the right that he condemns are the ones who won't vote for him or bow to his demands. But he's the least partisan. That's a joke. This guy who said that himself is a partisan hack, and Kamala might actually be the most left-leaning presidential nominee ever, since Bernie obviously was cut out in 2016, or it would have been him. But it's not a high bar to cross. It's generally moderates on the left who get the nomination, and she's far from radical. I mean, I for one wish that she was radical. I wish all our candidates were radical, but for him, for this partisan hack, child tax credits for working families to ease their financial strain is radical. Expanding healthcare in the wealthiest country in the world to cover all is radical. Creating jobs and infrastructure and with green energy and climate solutions is radical. And this is exactly why we needed Jessica back to shut down this propaganda nonsense.